Hey there, www.andrewmartinmusic.com. Another late night in the band, and this one will probably be a long one, and I will weave three different themes together to make a point. This one's called Panpsychotheism. So, like when I heard this as a Christian Gnostic, I just laughed. I laughed so hard. Now Paul Draper, who coined this term, it obviously is some variation of a monist. Like this physical universe is all there is to him. You could not espouse what he is espousing in any other way. So and when it comes to cosmology, I'm a dualist. Now, when it comes to the hard problem of consciousness, I have converted to dual aspect monism, and I'm going to get into why here. So I'm going to weave that in, and it's got to do with a medical condition I have that I call is very rare. It's on record with the medical establishment, my family doctor, and it's called low pressure syndrome, and it's a subset of seasonal affective disorder. I'm going to get to that in this video, but so we'll have to get into some terminology here. Merotheism is the idea that the universe is God. It's very similar to pantheism in a way. There's an ultimacy to it, though. Then there's monopsychism, which is sort of like, this is what I call the demiurgic mind. So I think Draper is right accidentally. It's his strict monism where he can't get to what I think is correct. And and I also, again, find it hilarious. And then there's the filter theory of consciousness, which is very similar to what Ken Wheeler posits, and he says it's the perfect analog for spirituality, the radio and the signal, and I think that's true in part. I mean, just through our anatomy, it looks like an antenna. Our brain could be the radio, right? It's coherent. It does make sense. But there's a caveat, and again, I'm going to explain as we go on here why I think he's right and wrong. So the terms panpsychotheism, merotheism, monopsychism, and the filter theory of consciousness, these are things that we're going to get into here. I wanted to just briefly read the definitions here. Merotheism, part Godism, ultimacy, is a proper part of the world, i.e., through ultimacy is in the world. The world is more than ultimacy. I.e., though ultimacy is in the world is more than ultimacy. This type is rare. So that's merotheism. Now there's dualism, and again, when it comes to what I call the hard problem of God, I'm still a dualist in cosmology. There's the demiurgic construct, and then there's what we call the pleroma, the spiritual. There's the material universe and the spiritual universe. So it's dualism. Ultimacy is not the world, and the world is not ultimacy. So there are two fundamentally different things or kinds of things depending on how the underlying ontology is read. Dualism includes both the view that ultimacy and the world are disjoint, that they share no parts, and the view that they bear a relation of proper overlap. They overlap in part, and as a Christian Gnostic, yes, there is an overlap because of Sophia. So yeah, well, these are the basic definitions of what I'm gonna tackle here. I'll link a video that I did a few years back called The Demiurgic Mind. And this is what I call, the demiurgic mind is what I call cosmic panpsychism, right? And it was came into existence via Sophia. It's known as Yaldabaoth. It is a sentient being, but it's material. It's a material entity. It's properly known as God because it's the God of this material universe. So again, Draper is right. It's just that his view is limited to his modern, view of cosmology. It's informed by science. If science doesn't, if it can't do an experiment on it, it doesn't exist, right? I don't share that deficiency. It very well may exist, but okay. So those are the terms laid out of what I'm going to address here. Double hand Bob on the terminology like panpsychotheism. You couldn't term a more accurate description of Yaldabaoth, right? Okay, so I've had this condition that I call, what do I call it? A bloody pain in the ass. It's low pressure syndrome. And it's a subset of seasonal affective disorder. And bear with me here. I'm gonna have to describe why I changed with deep thought my thoughts on the hard problem of consciousness and now subscribe to dual aspect monism, which contradicts the filter theory partially, but I'm going to argue that the filter theory could still be true even if dual aspect monism is true. So it's seasonal. What happens, and this started when I was 40, I'm 66 now, and it's very specific. It happens at very specific times to do with barometric pressure when the seasons change. So in the fall and in the spring, and it has very specific problems that it causes me to do with the glandular system, so the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the vascular nerve, the circadian rhythms within my body. So this is what happens, and this only happens during these episodes to do with barometric pressure changes, specifically when it goes from high, the higher the high to the low, the worse it gets. So if you get if I get really, really high pressure, 80 degrees, and then it turns to 50 really quickly, 50 cool, I rate that as a very bad episode, what I'm going to describe, a 10. And then, if it's just summertime and we have a couple of days of bad weather, it's a 1. It's not severe at all. It's not severe at all, and I don't really suffer. I managed to sleep through it without noticing that I was disrupted in my sleep. And this is what happens. It's I coin it to sleepus interruptus. So in the summertime, high pressures here for say 3 months. I sleep like a baby. I go to sleep at 11:30. I'm up at 8:30. Whatever. There's variations, but more or less, I just sleep right through it. But what happens on these nights where the low pressure kicks in after high pressure is I get what I call a serotonin spike, say at 1:30, say between 1:30 and 4:30 a.m. So it'll happen at different hours through different episodes. And what happens is I just become what I call hyper awake. So i.e. serotonin spike. And it's very unpleasant. I've been dealing with this for 26 years now. In the beginning, I didn't know what was happening, but we're pattern recognition machines, and when you lie awake, time after time, over year after year, you start to see the pattern quite easily. Although the state of consciousness that it puts me in, I would say, is very unproductive and very zombie-like. It's not a healthy state of consciousness. And yes, I'm a long-term meditator. I started meditating around the same time this started happening, coincidentally. And I would say that the meditation has helped me from going batshit crazy through these episodes. So it keeps me somewhat level, and the meditation doesn't heal this any more than it heals a broken leg. See Wilber's quadrants. So that there's this there's when I talk to my doctor about this, they don't know. I mean, they're good at broken legs. Things going on with the brain, in the mind. It's in its infancy. They don't know. I mean, I'm not blaming them. It is what it is. In another era that wasn't financialization and all about profit, the medical industry might care about this. As it stands right now, they couldn't care less about something like this. It's not profitable. So that's the basic condition. 26 years, and it's quite nasty. And what will happen? If I wake up at 1:30 a.m., I'll get back to sleep eventually, maybe about 5:30 a.m. And that afternoon at about the same time, 1:30, I will just be craving sleep, so that I'll get flooded with melatonin in the afternoon. If I wake up in the morning at 4:30 with the serotonin spike, it'll be 4:30 in the afternoon where I get that melatonin spike, and I just got a crave. Now, in the early days, when I had to be on the job site at 7 a.m., when I going through my 40s, this was a real problem, and I didn't know what was happening. It took me a few years to catch on to the repetitive pattern recognition. Oh, it only happens at this time, and there's another element to this where if I use certain paint products in those eras, I'm retired now, so this isn't a factor anymore. But certain paint products, especially with what's the chemical in it? Ammonia. It would cause this. So HP 2000 ammonia in that paint, it would cause this sleep disruption consistently. So again, you see the pattern, when you're trying to diagnose what's going on with you. These patterns emerge, year after year. You start to see it, you start to recognize it. So, and there, just as a side, in the early days, I'd have to go to my employer. I get to the job site at 7 a.m., and I'd struggle to get to lunchtime and say, I got to go home. I wouldn't go into what was going on, just say I'm not feeling well. And then hopefully I would get a reset. And usually in the early days, I would get a reset the next night and be fine again. The other thing that I'm out in the valley now, more towards the interior, right on the cusp of the Fraser Valley, as it starts to go into the interior. And this being away from the ocean for the last 5 years does mitigate these episodes. They're not as severe. So there's definitely something going on with the barometric pressure, especially down at ocean level during those intense low pressure storms. It's really a serious condition. 2 years ago in 2023 in the spring, it put me in the emergency ward, all kinds. And there's side effects. There's tinnitus that happens with it. Obviously, my brain is not getting the deep sleep it needs. It's sleepus interruptus. What other side effects? Obviously, that that zombie state of consciousness is not a very productive state of consciousness. Like, I used to stay up all night as a musician, and I would be very, very creative, and it's a good state of consciousness. This isn't. Whatever this is, it's not good. It's quite debilitating. It spikes my blood pressure. Like, if through the years through the summers where I'm sleeping well, I get 130 over 95, 130 over 90. And once I hit these seasonal things, it spikes up to 160 over 100 and stuff like that pretty consistently. So, I mean, to me, it's a serious condition, right? You know, it will probably be what ultimately kills me, because of all the side effects that come along with it. So it's a problem. It's okay. So that explains the condition. Now, Barstool philosopher here. Okay, I don't drink, but to coin, it was a good band. So I used to say, when I go to the bar, I order a double dualist. So I'm a dualist on the hard problem of consciousness, and I'm a dualist in what I've come to call the hard problem of God. So cosmology, there's earth and heaven. They're not the same thing. And I used to think that there's the brain and human cognition, and they're not the same thing. But I've altered my view on that because of this condition. And now I do think that the brain is causing cognition. It's so intertwined. The brain, so human cognition, which I do not call consciousness, I call it human cognition. Consciousness is a term that should only be used in the context of God. Okay, and we're just dumb. Okay, that word should not be used to describe human cognition, because we're too stupid a species to merit such a lovely word. I've changed my view on the hard problem of God, where I'm no longer a dualist, and the reason why is because I don't see how this condition is possible if cognition was something out there that somehow interacts with me. I mean, my brain chemicals should not interrupt consciousness, that lovely flow of consciousness. Oh, I just did it. Me bad. That lovely flow of cognition that we all have every day, right? I don't see how. I don't see how, if cognition was something out there that comes in here, I don't see how brain chemicals could alter it into such a debilitating state. So what I believe now, based on this condition, is that human cognition is dual aspect of the brain. So think of a coin. On one side is the brain, and the other side is cognition, and they're entwined, completely entwined. And this, to me, explains what's happening to me. Because if something goes wrong with the brain and the chemicals, then something goes wrong with your cognition, right? And this is just Occam's razor. It's very simple. You don't really need to get really complicated about this and posit things that are more problematic. They don't solve the problem. They make it more complicated. So I've adopted dual aspect monism because of this condition. And it's not just me. I mean, ask someone who puts somebody to sleep. It's anesthesiology. So ask somebody who puts somebody to sleep for surgery where their consciousness goes via chemicals. So you get a needle, you go to sleep, your consciousness disappears. Again, this is evidence to me. I don't see how this could happen. If consciousness was something out there that came in here, you would still have your consciousness. You you just wouldn't feel. I don't know. It's bizarre, but the basic point is I cannot for the life of me, and believe me, I've had many nights to think about this, right? And this switch over from a dualist view on the hard problem to dual aspect monism wasn't frivolous. This is years and years and years of contemplation about what's going on with me and my condition, and then what's going on. How does this possible in the greater scheme of things when it comes to this type of study? Yeah, it's a real problem, and obviously, I think I'm right. I mean, there's other evidences for this. If somebody loses a part of their brain, they lose that part of cognition. Again, I don't see how this is possible if cognition was something that comes from out there, right? I don't see how you could lose that part of your cognition just because you've lost a part of the brain. The simplest answer is you've lost the cognition because that your cognition is completely entwined with the brain. It's a part of the brain. It works with it. It's synchronous with it. So I don't think I'm going to change my view on this. I think that dual aspect monism is correct. And of course, this contradicts Draper's musings. But I also find that this condition is more consistent with my views of the demiurgic construct, right? That this limited cognition we have would be linked up with the brain, and it's almost like a dumb you down control mechanism. So difficult subject. I hope I'm doing it some justice here. So now we get into cosmology and his view of the oneness of cognition. And he's right. I believe he's right that the in my phrasing, I've generally come to call it cosmic panpsychism. This is the mind of the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, and it is real. It does have its own type of cognition, although a human is just not going to be able to grasp what it is. I mean, you have to have an amazing imagination to attempt to grasp the cognition of Yaldabaoth. Most humans, and I'm not saying I can do it, but yeah, it's not how Draper views it, but he's actually got it right. His in my view, what he's wrong about is saying it's the only thing, and this goes to his monopsychism. It's not the only type of cognition out there. There's actually true consciousness from the pleroma, or what the Vedas call the Purush. Now, I have to say here on that point that the Vedas are not the Abrahamic religions, and the Abrahamic religions are not the Vedas. They're not the same gods. They're totally different gods, totally different theologies. Not a fan of syncretism per se, although as a Christian Gnostic, I find Prakriti almost synonymous with the Kanoma of the Christian Gnostics. But there's definitely differences in ideology about Purush and the Pleroma, and I'm a Christian Gnostic, so I don't hold the view of the Vedas on Purush. I hold a different view, and it's something that that Draper is not going to accept because of his conditioning and modernity in science, right? I can't do a scientific test on it, so it doesn't exist, right? That's basically what it comes down to. But we Christian Gnostics we don't suffer from that malady, that deficiency. We have good imaginations. We can imagine the pleroma. So yes, now where this radio signal filter thing may come in is with true spirit consciousness, and not the prakriti cognition, not the dual aspect. I don't think that's working by the filter radio signal and analogy. It's there's something else going on there with supernal spiritual consciousness. That, to me, is where if filter consciousness is happening, it's happening there. It's happening through those ontologies. Is that the right word here? The supernal spiritual being, as it sometimes goes to some people and communicates with them through this transmission-like phenomenon. So that is basically what I wanted to get across here and what I wanted to say. So Draper, both right and wrong, and right in a hysterical way to me. Panpsychotheism to describe Yaldabaoth, yes, just hilariously funny to me. You probably don't get it, but when I first heard it, I nearly fell off the chair laughing. So yeah, that's basically. So to summarize here, looking at the idea of panpsychotheism as it relates to my health condition of low pressure system syndrome, and how it's altered my view in the hard problem of consciousness, why I adopted the dual aspect monist view of human cognition, which is very similar to the way Samkhya views cognition. They don't call human cognition consciousness, and I agree with that. It's a dumbed down cognition, and intentionally so, in my opinion. It's just the way Yaldabaoth rules and rolls. So that Saturnian thing. So okay, I'll leave it at this. It's I also get that, like, this is a very refined field of inquiry. Like, most people are not gonna have a clue about this. Tough being a Sigma male. What is it? The rarest Myers-Briggs LTJ. I forget what it is, but I'm one of the rarest ones. And a Sethian Christian Gnostic. I mean, yeah. How did this happen? Okay, www.andrewmartinmusic.com. Ciao.